If you're searching for proof that healing is possible, this story will show you exactly how one family did it and how you can apply the same strategies today. You've been told it's incurable, but here at Renegade Remission, we believe in rewriting the story. If you're facing a terminal or chronic illness, you are not alone. I'm Eleni Welch, certified nutritionist, and each week I share healing strategies and remission stories to help you take control of your health, feel better, and rediscover hope. Welcome back to Renegade Remission. Today's episode features a special guest, and I want you to stay with us because in this episode you'll learn the exact mindset shifts and daily habits that helped a family navigate and overcome a terminal diagnosis, nutrition and lifestyle strategies that support healing across all chronic conditions, and practical tools you can apply today to feel more empowered and in control of your own healing path. This conversation is heartfelt, practical, and deeply hopeful, and I cannot wait for you to hear it. I am here today with a guest, Ryan Sternagel, and we're going to talk about your journey, you and your wife, Teddy, your journey with your son, Ryder, and his stage 4 cancer diagnosis. So it's an honor to have you here. Your journey with your son has been incredible. So I'd love if you could, to start, share with us what Ryder's story was with his cancer diagnosis.
I mean, we could spend hours on just the initial first few days, but yeah, long story short, my wife was breastfeeding him about a month before his first birthday, and she felt a lump in his back, kind of in his lower spine area one day, and that was concerning. And then the more we started thinking about it, the more we just kind of other red flags started piling up. Right. He had fallen off the growth chart. He was born in the 90-something percentile. And then he was at that point, maybe somewhere in the 20s, and he wasn't crawling and couldn't handle solid foods. And, it's first time parents, and everybody tells you, well, they grow at their own pace. But just all these things together with now this pretty notable lump sticking out of his back. We took him to a doctor, and it was a naturopathic doctor, actually. So we were already on the naturopathic doctor train, but that particular naturopathic doctor was not too concerned. Didn't really say anything about the lump, and just sent us home with a prescription for physical therapy to teach him how to crawl, and occupational therapy to teach him how to eat. And yeah, and hopefully needless to say, we didn't really follow up on that. And then we went to the hospital, and then the doctor there took an x-ray, and all he saw was that Ryder was constipated. So that guy sent us home with a prescription for a laxative or something, and told us to come back in 6 weeks if the lump was still there. Did not wait 6 weeks. Came back, I think, the following Monday. I think this was on a Thursday or Friday, and demanded to see another doctor. Over the weekend, my wife had done the Dr. Google thing and basically diagnosed our son with neuroblastoma. And the nurse was saying, well, I work in the oncology ward, and your son doesn't look like those kids, and there's no way he has neuroblastoma. But we basically said, we're not going anywhere until we get some sort of formal imaging. Can we just please get an ultrasound to calm our nerves or whatever? And got the ultrasound. That did reveal a large mass in his spine and a couple secondary masses. And one of those secondary tumors was metastasized to his hip bones. And so we were in one hospital, and they wanted us to go to this different hospital, which was the main kind of oncology hospital for children. They actually wanted to get started with chemotherapy before we even got biopsy pathology reports back. So they didn't even really know exactly what it was. We decided to get a second opinion, which was not greeted very favorably when we said that. And that resulted in like a train of social workers and nurses and doctors and everybody coming in the room trying to tell us, talk us out of leaving and going and getting the second opinion. We did get the biopsy, and we did get a Hickman line placed because, one, we weren't saying we're not going to do chemotherapy, no way, no how. Just we're going to go get a second opinion and see if, their recommendations line up with your recommendations and that sort of thing. But we did leave, and we went home and just immediately started researching, calling around, ordering supplements, talking to cancer coaches, talking to different clinics, talking to different hospitals, just, trying to get the broadest lay of the land that we could. And that only lasted a couple days because that line that we got put in, something got screwed up that gave him a bloodstream staph infection. So he was septic with staph. Woke up in the middle of the night. He's got a huge fever, starts puking all over the place. Drove back to the hospital as fast as we could. And so at that point, we were on IV antibiotics and inpatient in the hospital, and whatever we were thinking might happen in terms of going to Mexico. Or, I mean, we were talking to hospitals in Hong Kong and everywhere in between, right? But all that was kind of out the window. And it was a very serious situation because it was inside of his spine. And, some of those kids, when they don't get it caught in time, they get paralyzed, they die. So, yeah, we knew we did need to shrink the tumor quickly. And we did consent to a round of chemotherapy and got the infection cleared and left the hospital, and then thought we were going back to, okay, let's research and figure out what the next best step is. And that's when Child Protective Services showed up at the door and said, "It sounds like you weren't complying with the hospital, but yay, you are now. So as long as you keep doing the chemotherapy, then we won't take your kid." A lot of people are surprised to this day that that's a thing. The minute we got that diagnosis, I figured we'd probably have a Child Protective Services case. I was actually surprised that it's like, what took you so long, sort of thing when they showed up. They don't want you doing what you think is best for your kid.
Wow. And so you ended up obviously going with the chemotherapy. And so how many rounds of that did you go through with Ryder, and what did you implement in addition to that?
So yeah, I mean, we had a juicer like in the hospital room, and we had family bringing us coolers of produce, and we were juicing in there and had our big stash of supplements. Every time the doctors and nurses left the room, we were, set up shop and started pumping everything into them. And we also obtained the guidance and services of a naturopathic oncologist on what supplements and how to protect from chemotherapy and all this stuff, but also kind of sneaking out of the hospital and over to his office and doing IV vitamin C and DMSO. And we were also just starting to turn our home into a little mini healing clinic, right? When we were back, but the times we were back home and got the sauna, got the hydrogen, just started racking up all the different healing devices we could, but had a biomat on his crib and all this stuff, right? Then it became like kind of a negotiation with the hospital. At first they told us the standard of care was 4 rounds. And I said, well, what are you looking for in those 4 rounds? They gave us a percentage reduction size in the masses and some other reductions in the markers and these sorts of things. And I said, well, what if we can get there in 2 rounds? And they said, well, that's never been done and it won't happen. And they usually don't scan until after 4 rounds, right? Or rescan. And I said, well, can we get the scan after 2 rounds? And they said, sure, if it makes you happy. We got the scan after 2 rounds, blew those markers out of the water. And then it was, we never said that. It's still going to be the 4 rounds. But yeah, so then, we did the 3rd round, and then we're coming up to the 4th round. And we said, okay, it's coming up on number 4. We're going to be done after this, right? And that's when, they said, no, whoever said anything about 4 rounds, it's going to be 8. And we need to start talking about radiation too. And it's like, well, he's doing better than he was supposed to. And now you're adding more rounds on. So yeah, that's on the way home from that appointment. My wife just looked at me in the car and said, should we move to Utah? And I said, yes. And under 2 weeks later, we were gone. The rationale was that Utah is both kind of high on the personal liberty scale and also high on the natural health friendly scale, whereas, Washington was high on natural health friendly, but low on personal liberty. And Utah was kind of that sweet spot of a little bit of both. But it was one of those intuition things that we just thought everything was going to work out. And if it didn't work out there, then we'd figure something else out. But fortunately it worked out. Left behind all of our family and friends and made a new journey out to Utah. And that team was the new team was willing to, we told them we'd like to back off and see if that was enough chemo for Ryder, right? And they were willing to treat Ryder like an individual and not just be so dogmatic about the standard of care. And they were super cool. They said, I would prefer that you do more, but you're the parents and you know best, and we're here to support you. And it's like music to our ears. Are we really hearing this right now? And yeah, so that was the last conventional medicine that he ever got. We kept getting scans every few months, and tumors kept shrinking and shrinking. Eventually, the secondaries they went away. The metastasis to the hip bones went away. The primary shrunk. And then at some point, it just kind of leveled off. And everyone's pretty happy calling it just scar tissue at this point.
What was Ryder's prognosis when you very first got the cancer diagnosis?
So it was stage 4 neuroblastoma. They weren't sure at first whether it was high risk or intermediate risk, although they did say, even before we figured out which risk category it was, that no matter what it was, judging from all the nerve damage in his spine and just how the tumor was just engulfing everything, that even if he survived the cancer, he'd likely never walk. And, now he lives in Park City and skis in the winter and mountain bikes in the summer and does jujitsu all the time. And yeah, so that's great. That did not turn out to be true. But a couple of years later, he was diagnosed with autism, and he didn't really seem autistic before the conventional treatment, and then he was after, and it was pretty considerable for those first couple of years. And we just doubled down on all the detox and added some brain support stuff, and that was the next healing journey. And now he's, I don't know, I call him a slightly quirky savant. He's a genius. So anyway, it comes back to just, thank God we got him out of as much as we did. And that new team was willing to treat him like an individual. And, they were okay with, they knew we were doing a lot of stuff on this side of the fence.
Right. And so speaking of things that you were doing on this side of the fence, what did the nutrition protocol look like for Ryder?
Yeah, that was interesting because originally at first he was one, right? So I mean, his diet consisted of breast milk, and we tried to model the kind of the Gerson formula as well as we could, and we weren't doing full blown Gerson protocol to the letter, but as far as the juicing went, he was getting just a whole ton of juice mixed in with supplements, the breast milk. And then about a year, I'd say, a little over a year after the diagnosis, we took the feeding tube out after he could eat, and then we could actually start feeding him solid food. And that became these crazy mixtures that we would make of, I don't know, all sorts of stuff. But so, I mean, we try to keep away from being super dogmatic as far as this worked for me, so this is the only way. But yeah, I mean, that was for the first several years.
I mean, I really appreciate your philosophy on the dietary side of things, because that's exactly what I talk about in the podcast as well, is there is no one right answer. Like, people get better from the whole spectrum of things. My nutrition mentor is working with patients with ALS, and she has somebody who's gone into complete remission from ALS following a carnivore diet, right? And eating only meat. And then there are people who heal using the Gerson protocol, which is juices and largely vegan and vegetables and plant heavy. And then there's a whole range of things in between. I shared a story of a patient who had reversed a glioblastoma multiforme stage 4 brain tumor following a keto diet. And so it's like, you cannot be dogmatic in this world, because people get better from every range of things, and everybody's metabolism is so different, and their environment is different, and their genetics and how they digest food is all different. So yeah, I appreciate your stance on that. It's like, this is what worked for Ryder.
Yeah. And it's, with all the back and forth and arguments and, good points on both sides, and people getting better with different approaches seemingly diametrically opposed to each other. At this point, it just seems kind of silly to pick, to say this is the perfect diet for everyone. If anything, it just proves that humans are super adaptable, right? And we've been eating food for a long time, and some of us went over here and ate this stuff, and some of us went over here and ate this stuff. So, I mean, if you want to look at, what's the best diet, I mean, maybe ask yourself what your direct ancestors were eating. And, certainly we resonate most strongly with a lot of plants and all the wonderful anti-cancer compounds that you find. Those are all in plants, be it curcumin from turmeric or ginseng. Scientifically it gets really easy to say that plants are probably a good idea. But in terms of, just being super dogmatic about what everyone should be eating or shouldn't be eating. And there's also a difference between what your normal diet should be and what your therapeutic diet should be in the face of a healing journey, right? We're not juicing 12 glasses a day anymore, although might not be a bad idea. And it's probably a good idea every once in a while just to clean things out and give yourself a boost. But I think, foundational nutritional type stuff has always been really important. That's, vitamins, minerals, essential fatty acids, amino acids. I think, again, there's a time and a place for, isolated vitamins here and there if you're feeling a deficiency or something like that. But the more you can just, the more you can get everything from whole food sources, which doesn't necessarily mean just trying to get it all from diet, but getting things like marine phytoplankton or Klamath AFA, blue-green algae, right, that just have all known nutrients in small amounts, but also highly, highly, highly bioavailable, right? And we're always big on just getting a ton of chlorophyll into them because it almost matches your blood, and it's so much crazy research on the more chlorophyll you take in, the more you can actually process energy. And it's always a good idea to be on a trace mineral product, getting all those trace minerals. Some of the bigger minerals that you need a ton of, like magnesium, iodine, these sorts of things, we'll take a dedicated magnesium or iodine product. I'm really big on omega-6 / polyunsaturated fatty acids. That's what our cell membranes are mostly made of. So, if you want toxicants to get out of your cells and you want nutrients to get into your cells, then you should probably take care of your cell membranes, which means high quality, fresh pressed seed oils and flax oils, black cumin oil, so on and so forth, right? That's always been really big for us. And then, on the protect side, then that's more of the, immune supportive supplements, metabolic supportive supplements, epigenetic supportive supplements, things like this. So trying to, just asking yourself what it is you're trying to accomplish and what are the best products within those categories, and, just kind of rotating through them. One of my favorite doctors said, when you've got your house on fire, don't go looking for the arsonist, right? Which means, to put out the fire first and then go looking for causes and, focusing.
Let's dip into the intuition piece of things, because you mentioned that maybe a few times. What was that side of the journey like for you? Did you have a strong sense of intuition throughout your journey with Ryder? How often were you able to lean on that and let it direct your steps?
My wife is the one with the really crazy intuition on her. So whenever we listened to Teddy's intuition, things turned out well. But the few times that we kind of logicked ourselves out of it turned out not to be a great decision. So, I mean, there was that time just moving to Utah. And I mean, there's, I don't know, just so many different things along the way. Just the getting a wild hair to buy land in the middle of the woods and build a non-toxic house from the ground up. But, that's just, it kind of made sense to us to, okay, let's just remove all possible cause and give him his own little healing sanctuary. But then on the other hand, that sounds crazy to a lot of people. It's like you guys are going through stage 4 cancer with your kid, and you're tens of thousands of dollars in debt, and now you're talking about building this house. And I lost my day job actually just after we had broken ground on that house. All of a sudden we were like, $60,000 over budget from day one. And then I lose my day job. And then we had the wild idea for me not to look for another day job, but to do this online thing full time. And early on in the journey, we started putting everything we were doing out there to Facebook for fundraising. We were getting really tired of being the only family in the hospital, not availing ourselves of the hospital snack cart and giving our kids the Oreos and candy and pizza and all that stuff, right? And just figured, well, we can put what we're doing out there, and hopefully it'll resonate with some folks, and maybe it'll help some families. So, that grew into a bit of a following, and then people started asking more questions about what we were doing. So we made a website and tried to start to write some articles, and then started a podcast to just interview different doctors and try to get my questions answered that way. And so, we had that going around all this time when I lost the day job, and somehow it all worked out. Yeah.
You mentioned that online community you were building. What was the support of that community like during your journey, and how did it affect you?
That was everything. We lost the vast majority of our friends, from high school, college, so on and so forth, just because no one wanted to approve of, taking your kid off conventional treatment, which, I get on the one hand. On the other hand, it was kind of a bummer, but obviously we had each other, but it was just having that whole community of people that either just were on the same page and supporting you because they got it, or people that were actually going through something similar themselves and trying to figure out the integrative path themselves. It really meant a lot to us, just having that having that group of people come together and everybody kind of being on the same team. And I think back to so many of the families that we were going through with it kind of right in the beginning, and stay in touch with a lot of them. And yeah, it's a good thing to surround yourself with people who are on the same page. That's, don't try to make your friends and family like get it. Just get whatever support you can from them, and find other people to geek out with on all the health stuff, right?
Can you tell us a bit about the Stern method? What is the Stern method? What does it involve?
That's a great question, Eleni, and one that I don't think we've fully answered. 11 something years after making the name. Our last name is Sternagel. That's hard to remember or spell. And the method part is, my wife and I are both not inherently super type A, organized type people, right? But we realized that we needed to make ourselves those type of people in order to get all the things done, and make sure the supplements happen when they're supposed to happen, and make sure the juice happen when it's supposed to happen, and make sure to get, several outings in the woods per week, and making sure to get out and ground in nature, and making sure to do our morning breath work exercises with Ryder. That was super cute. As soon as he could learn to talk, we started doing like breath work and affirmations with him and all this stuff. And so, I mean, we just really leaned into, we're just going to get as organized as possible. And we had printouts on the fridge, and just tried to make routines around everything, which takes a little bit of time. But I would implore anyone going through a healing journey to do something to that effect, right? It's like everything that you should be doing, you've probably taken in 100 times more information than you're actually implementing right now. So before you take in any more information, just sit down and write everything out that you should be doing. Just get that on paper, and then figure out, like, how am I actually going to implement this into my life? When are these specific things actually going to happen? How can I combine as many of these things as I can into a routine, right? I know I should be meditating. I have a sauna. Do I need to meditate and then do the sauna, or can I meditate inside of the sauna? Just figure out everything you can combine, and just make it happen. Yeah.
And I just want to touch base on something you just covered, which is getting out in nature. Can you talk about the importance of getting out in nature and what role you felt like it played in Ryder's healing journey?
Yeah. It's been a really big thing for us since early on. We were inpatient in the hospital, but even in the hospital, we were still busting them out of there a couple times a day, and walking them around in the sun with IV pole and all. Right, the sad sight that was on the little trail behind the hospital. But we just, instinctively, I just knew, like, just sitting around in this hospital all day is not the best. We got to get the sunshine on them. But yeah, especially after we got to Utah and just got a little more freedom from the hospital, and we just started exploring all the different trails and just doing everything we could. And I mean, you can look up the forest bathing studies and just see all the different markers they took, showing that, it boosts your immune system and decreases inflammation and so on and so forth, right? And it's like going back to how expensive everything could be, and supplements are expensive. Even juicing can get expensive. Any IV therapies can get really expensive really fast, right? Getting all these different pieces of healing gear. And if you're depressed because you can't afford that super high-end immune supplement that you think would be helpful, well, just get out in the woods, and that's a high-end immune supplement, right? So yeah, just doing as much as you can to replete yourself with the power of nature, which again is, you can get cool devices for some of that stuff too, right? But it's also free outside.
On this podcast, I talk a lot about the mindset piece of things. And that's very tricky with a 1-year-old. So can you talk a little bit more about how you did approach that with him?
Yeah. So it is the most important thing of all. As much as we can geek out on the nutrition and the supplements and, blah, blah, blah. There's so many stories of people who didn't really do a lot of that stuff, but just changed the way they were thinking, and all of a sudden everything went away. I mean, there's the placebo effect, right? All the mainstream medicine is trying to control against the placebo effect, because they know it. So they're kind of tacitly acknowledging that's, wow, this is super powerful. But so if it's that powerful, and that people can heal themselves with a sugar pill just because they believe it, then you would think that maybe we should try to harness that a little more. And on the flip side, there's the nocebo effect, right? Where the doctors will tell somebody they're going to die in a few months, and they, right on schedule, they die, and then they get an autopsy, and it turns out they were misdiagnosed in the first place. So Yeah. I mean, you can, just go on and on with the list of stories like that, but it's that is the big differentiator we see out of patients that make it versus patients that don't, is just the positive mental attitude and the knowing that everything is going to be okay, right? So again, going back to that, how am I supposed to tell my 1-year-old these sorts of things? Kind of the piece that we came to with that early on was the more that we could apply these things to ourselves. He's more connected to us than anybody else. So the more we can start implementing this into our own psyches, the more is going to kind of rub off on him, right? And so that was the big thing. Speaking over him every night, I'd just sit there at his crib and put my hands on him and just try to pass as much healing vibes as I could. And then when he started talking, that became part of the routine. We'd do our breath work, and I'd have him, do all these positive affirmation type things and saying, I am healthy, vibrant, and thriving over and over and over again. Right. And we just started getting them to really embody that mindset as much as we could as soon as he could start talking. Ryder is now a happy, healthy little boy, 12 plus years later, living the dream. Yeah.
I hope this interview encouraged you, dear listener. You can learn more from Ryan and Teddy at thestern, STERN, method.com. That site will also link you to their supplement company, Our Health Naturally, where you can use the code RENEGADE for 10% off all supplements. And for the first 2 weeks after this episode airs, Ryan has offered an extra 20% discount using code RENEGADE20. If you're looking for support, expert guidance, or a healing community, Ryan also runs Going Integrative Plus, a weekly live call series with top integrative cancer doctors, plus sessions with their nutritionist, energy healing, and more. You can join at goingintegrativeplus.com and use code RENEGADE50 to get 50% off your first month. Thank you for listening, and as always, trust your body, trust your intuition, and go be renegades.